It's time for your number one NAI and men's basketball podcast to begin, as the Road to Muni podcast with Junior and Coach Lubbers begins now.
Hello, NAI Hoops Nation, and welcome to another episode of the Road to Muni podcast. This is finally into February, and with our first conference tournament game tipping off on the 24th. Coach, it's that time of year.
Yeah, we're getting down to the wire here, and it's been fun to see the evolution of a few teams in particular, and some teams that were struggling for a little while early on, and now back on the top of the heap where we thought they'd be at the beginning of the year, and some other surprise faces and all that stuff. It all comes together here by the end of the month, and we set the field for the tournament.
Yeah, it's kind of like you said, some of the teams struggled early, but it seems like Cream's starting to rise to the top a little bit. And, even a team like Madonna, if you look at them, they're, can they get all the way back to the top? But, probably not from in the WAC, but, they're a team that certainly has put themselves back in at least the bubble talk here, going into probably what's going to be the WAC tournament, as they've now moved back into the top four. And a couple weeks ago, they before they started their 8-game win streak here, they were a team that probably had no shot to get in. So a team that even made it to Kansas City last year, who are starting to play their best basketball. And I think that's what this time of year is about. You want to be playing your best basketball right now.
Yeah. And then you see some other, perennial powerhouses that maybe treaded water for a little bit back in December in Grace and Oklahoma Wesleyan. Now they've found their way back to the top of the league standings in those respective leagues. So, there's some teams sort of coming back to life here and making a push when it matters. So that's been kind of fun to watch as well.
Yeah, even like a Langston team, who has been so good as of late. Now they're kind of battling every game. Here they just had a crazy ending to a game. I'm sure that as this is coming out, you'll see them in our weekly by categories because of a last second shot that they went down on, which is just nuts. But I was watching being the Iowa State fan that I am, I was watching the college game day for Division I yesterday and on Saturday, and Coach Osselberg said that because they've been battling their own adversity, and he said a great quote the other day that everybody fights it through adversity throughout the year. Some people, especially this time of year, you're either coming in it or going into adversity, or you're coming out of adversity, and it's all about how you handle it. I think that's kind of why you've been seeing a lot of these teams that we're used to seeing starting to play some really good basketball. Just they're teams that have consistently battled through that the last 3, 4, 5 years, and here they are.
Yeah, and if you can, all those things are good. And if you could choose when your adversity happens, I don't think there's a coach in America that would want their adversity to happen in February. So, it's good to work through that stuff. And it's even better when it shows up in November and December, because you'd like the engine to be running on all cylinders and running smooth in February, not battling through injuries and doing that stuff. And you can call what you want adversity, but you have to be healthy to win a championship. That's a little talked about ingredient, right? Your best players need to be available typically to win a national championship. So health matters, consistency matters, execution matters, matchups matter. There's so many different ingredients that go into it, and those will continue to show themselves as we move through the month here and start talking about the field a little bit more and conference tournaments and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, and speaking of Division I basketball a little bit, they have a thing of KenPom, and it's kind of their analytic, software or system that's been used, and I know that they have a lot more years of data, so they can come back and get a lot more in depth with their stuff. But I know that one of the things I was watching, and I've heard this every year, is just like they can kind of pinpoint, the teams that are the favorites to win the national title, because KenPom, using several different data points, they can kind of zero in onto who fits that criteria. That's happened every year, basically for 22 years, I think, going now. And so I was just curious this past week, and if you guys are listening, haven't read it yet, NEIHoopsReport.com. There's an article that we put out that just says RPI National Champion, but it's basically a deep dive look into, basically using the RPI data from and now at the NEI level, there's only 3 years to go back on. So this is the fourth year of the NEI using the RPI. So I will preface again to say that, the data is still growing. I'm sure that some of these data points will change, but and as we get into year 5, year 10, there will be some different. I think there'll be some more exact data to kind of dive into, but it's kind of a fun way to look at it. In the last over the last 3 years, how has the national champion, the Fab Four teams, the quote unquote Elite Eight or quarterfinal teams, what does that look like as far as RPI goes? And in this article, so we do a little deep dive. I know some of those analytical guys out there, or girls or guys out there. I'm big into analytics. I like them. I don't think that they're the end all be all, but I thought it was be a fun way to deep dive into it. And Coach, using the RPI data over the last 3 years, it's been kind of fun to watch. Like, so the NEI National Champion all had a final RPI greater than 0.610. Runner-ups were all between 0.59 and 0.61. And then the Fab Four teams were all 0.59 and 0.644. And then outside of Ottawa, also being in the RPI top 10. So all the Fab Four teams outside of Ottawa were all inside the top 10 of the final RPI poll that came out. And then the quarterfinal teams, minus last year when we had a 14 and 15 seed in Evangel and Central Baptist from last year's quarterfinal round, they've all been inside the RPI top 25. So, it's just one of those things that, again, as we're looking, as a fun way to look at who could possibly win a national title, kind of using the analytics, kind of zeroed in on a few teams. And, again, only 3 years of data. This is our fourth year. This is using a data set that is previous, from this year's set is not the final one yet. So we'll see who makes it into the final RPI, and then we'll have another follow-up article on that. But Coach, basically using all the data points, it leaves us with three contenders that I think are very, very valid right now in Arizona Christian, Georgetown, and Bethel, Indiana.
Yeah, no, there's it's a fun way to think about it, because you'll also see, I think the longer this goes on, what you're going to see is coaches are going to figure this system out, right? And they're going to know how to position themselves well on this grid and in this system, mostly for seeding purposes, to put themselves in a really good spot with seeding. So there's always the analytical side and the number side of it. But then there's also the side of it, kind of like we were touching on a second ago. Then someone rolls an ankle, right? And then somebody XYZ. And then there's all these other intangible ingredients that you can't quantify with metrics that go into winning a title. So that's what sometimes, it comes down to. And so these are all the programs listed here and on these charts. These are all great programs, great coaches, and it'll be fun to see it come together. It's a really interesting observation to see, the title team. You can boil it down just using that data down to those three teams. You could look at all three of those or four of those and make a case, right? But you can also extend beyond that. So it'll be curious to see how that unfolds over time and who disrupts the apple cart.
Yeah. And like I said, it's just 3 years of data, so it's a fun way to look at it. We'll see if this year, if it falls in suit, or, right now we've never had a RPI number one win in a national title, so that's why we didn't include Freed Hardeman in there. They're the defending national champs right now, and up to this week, before getting beat on Saturday, we're the number one team in the country again. So I imagine they'll fall in this week's rankings a little bit. But, it's just a kind of a way for anybody that's hasn't seen the article, want to dive into the analytics a little bit. It's a fun way to look at it. We're going to keep tracking it all the way through as the next couple RPI polls come out until the final RPI poll is out, and just track it through the national tournament. See if it falls suit. See if there's some new data points added. I'm sure eventually we'll have some teams outside the top four win a national title, but we'll continue to grow the data as it goes along as well. And just wanted to put together a fun little article just for everybody to look at, and we'll see if it's like Ken Palm down the road, right, Coach? That 20
Yeah,
years of data, and it's pretty spot on.
yeah. Well, it's yeah, they set those numbers and lines for a reason out there in the shiny city called Las Vegas, and it's not an accident. Those are all analytics and where people are putting putting their faith and confidence in different people, and that moves those numbers. But um, yeah, this is interesting. It's fun. I actually love that a few years ago the NAI went to a little bit more objective approach to how we're selecting and seeding and moving through the tournament. I think that was a very healthy move for the organization, frankly, in general, just to make that shift, to make the field bigger, make the process a little bit more objective. There's always going to be some subjective ingredients to it. You can't eliminate the human factor, but as objective as they can make it is great, and provides the most level playing field for all the teams throughout the country. So I think this model is really good, and excited to see where the NAI continues to take it and refine it. I like watching coaches sort of play the system as well. That's fun to see a bunch of smart people working the numbers and working the system. So they're competitors no matter what it is. You could put put a bunch of rocks at the end of the driveway and tell them if they get them first, they're the champion, and they'll figure out how to do it. But so it's good to see them working these systems and figuring it out.
Yeah, yep. It is always something to kind of watch out for, and yeah, I mean, worst case scenario, to be able to try to quote unquote, I don't know, manipulate the RPI in a
Yeah,
way. It does set you up for, and it's not the only data point used for seeding, but it is a big one, and it does set you up for possible first round hosting and a lot of that kind of stuff too. So,
yeah,
we know that.
hosting matchups. I mean,
Yep.
there's a lot of reasons it's a good deal to be at the top of that pile there.
Yep.
So it does matter, and you think about all that. There's a comprehensive set of ingredients required to be great, and this is one of them. It's not the only one, but it certainly is one of them, and it's good to highlight and point out. So I love the way you're thinking about that, and thanks for bringing that up to everybody's attention.
Yeah, just wanted to have a little bit of different perspective on it, but I have to laugh, Coach, because on Saturday, when we posted our top games, I posted Separation Saturday because there was a lot of
Yeah,
games that if the top teams of their conference would have won, or even some of the teams that were fighting for some positioning would have won games, there would have had some separation, and Separation Saturday turned into Cluster Saturday because
right.
it seemed like all the right teams kind of lost, and um, it ended up making things a lot more chaotic across some of these leagues. I felt like there were some leagues that were some teams that we're getting down to just 3 or 4 games left, and for most of these teams, and when you have a game lead or 2 game lead going into those final 3 or 4, you're sitting in pretty good shape, and it just seemed like what was supposed to be Separation Saturday did not come to fruition in a lot of leagues, and we're
Yeah,
seeing a lot of 2 and 3 team ties heading into these final couple games here.
yeah, it's fun. And you could look ahead for the next 2 weeks and see some really meaningful games that will probably determine conference champions all the way through the final Saturday. For sure, we have at least one really big one this week coming up, and in terms of conference standings, and there's several others that are coming up. I mean, you got, I think the last game of the year is Georgetown and Freed Hardman, right? They play the last day of the regular season. You got Bethel Grace playing this Saturday, which Grace has found their way back to the top of the pile in the crossroads. So I just think there's so many different fun matchups coming in these last 2 weeks that are really meaningful, not just for conference championships, but also for seeding and influencing some of the other metrics associated with tournament play. So it'll be fun.
Yeah,
Then the conference tournaments are going to be a blast. I know we're not going to get too much into that today, but I think there's going to be so many fun matchups, and there's so many good teams this year that the basketball is just going to get better here over the next 6 weeks.
yeah, and it's also that time of year now where I know I talked about a lot of these games or a lot of these leagues are um, you know now we have a tie for first place. You mentioned Grace Bethel. I mean, we have we have a kind of a bit of surprise with Cott going down in for Rock or for Montana Tech.
Yeah.
It's Montana Tech's kind of on a whirlwind here a little bit, and Providence now has them tied for potential chance to take over first place here in this final week. But we also have some teams this week, Coach, that are primed to lock up. Some of them lock up their number one seed, but several of these leagues also that number one seed also includes an auto bid for the national tournament. So,
Yeah.
and we'll keep it posted out. Everybody posted on who's who and which is which. That way you don't have to figure it out yourselves. But we got to look at a team, like out of the River States Conference and St. Mary Woods, who's they've been playing great basketball, 11-1 in the River States, and 21-3 overall, and a team that maybe doesn't get talked about a lot, but playing some really good basketball, and they're going to be one of the first teams to be able to clinch. And then you got some teams like College of Idaho, who's sitting in a pretty good shape here out of the Cascade. I forget how many years in a row. I know they did not win during the COVID year, but outside of that, I want to say they've won the Cascade some like 8 or 9 years here. So, you got some traditional teams, you got some newer teams, but all in all, it's we're gonna have probably 5 or 6 teams locking up some auto bids this week, which is it's kind of fun to start seeing the field come together.
Yeah, and we talked about the Red River several times this year, and what a fun conference that is, and LSUA I think can essentially claim that title with a win over Xavier this week. I think they kind of cleaned that one up as well from my evaluation, and so that's a team as well, right? They've really, in a tough league, they've risen to the top and proved they belong, and so yeah, it's been a really fun journey so far, and it's action packed these next 2 weeks, and a few really critical games coming up this week, and then there's always we talked about this earlier, but we got senior nights coming on display here in these last 2 weeks, and there is definitely an emotional ingredient to senior nights that can motivate a team to uncommon results. So I think there's some trap games in here too coming down the stretch that people will run into, whether they like it or not.
Yeah, and some of that even comes with some of these teams maybe not get the biggest crowds in the world, especially if they're not winning ball games, and then all of a sudden a senior night can happen, and you end up with a full. You show up as a 1 or 2 team in your league, and you're going up against maybe a team that's 7, 8, 9 in your league, and who doesn't typically have a big crowd. All of a sudden it's senior night, and you have a full gym. So.
Yeah, I've seen some really bizarre things over the years happen on senior night with kids that maybe didn't play all year come out and hit for 30 or some wild thing like that. Because you also don't know who some of these kids are. I mean, they've been, they're just because they're seniors doesn't mean they've been on the court all year. And so sometimes, and it doesn't mean they're not good players either. They're just haven't been used in that scenario. So sometimes you got these kids that come out of nowhere and it's like, well, are they a shooter? Are they not a shooter? I mean, you don't really know. It's a guessing game. So some coaches really transform their lineups relative to seniors, and I never did traditionally when I was coaching. It was another game and we played it and so on and so forth. But other coaches really move their whole lineup to accommodate for those moments. So there's an unpredictable ingredient to those senior nights too that can factor in.
Well, and let me talk to us, Coach. So when you were you can talk from a home perspective and from an away perspective. Did you prefer the game or the senior nights to happen in between at the women's halftime, in between games, your own halftime, right before starting lineups? How did you handle it at home, and then what did you prefer? Because I know a lot of coaches are different on this opinion as well. So
yeah, I'm kind of a big believer that the team that has the better players and executes is the one that wins, despite any circumstance that's going around. And so the ball, whether the ball's too inflated, the ball's too soft, the senior night happens before, the senior night happens after. As long as the court's the same length, the rims are the same height, and we've all had the same level of prep time and conditions, excuses are cheap. So I was always wired to say I couldn't care less when it happens. I would like to know so I can prep a pregame cadence that makes sense for our team. But beyond knowing what the pregame is going to look like and having a predictable thing that we can talk to our teams about. I always thought they were fun nights. when I would go into an opposing gym and have a chance to really respectfully celebrate the kids on the other side as well. I always embrace those moments. I thought that was really fun, and it's also fun to see how different schools do it. And so I think those are fun nights. It's part of the beauty of it, and whatever makes the most sense for the kids and the families, frankly, is what I always spent more time thinking about than how it might impact the way we played. Because at the end of the day, they're going to throw the ball up, and about 35 seconds in, we're playing, regardless of when we held up the jerseys that were framed. So
Yeah, and it's you bring up another great point. One of my favorite parts, I think, this week is when people, because most of them do get videotaped and or taped live, and it is very cool to see, especially those guys that have been around for 4 years and maybe you know scored 2,000 points or whatever it may be, four-time all league player. A lot of times you'll see opposing coaches go over and after they're done with
oh
their
yeah,
family and stuff and dap them up or give them a hug or whatever it may be. It's a really cool moment for everything, and even opposing crowds when you have some of those league games that or where you have a bigger away crowd as well. It's cool everybody coming together in those moments. So
yeah, it's one of the most meaningful. I think if you're, in my estimation, just my perspective, if you're doing it right, if you're coaching right and you have the right intentions with helping young people, it's one of the most powerful and meaningful evenings throughout the season. Just because of the history and the relationship that's been built with those kids and the launching point that they'll have when they leave your university. So I think if you're doing things right, those are really meaningful evenings for both the parents, the families, the kids, the coaches, the teammates, everybody in the community. And so there's definitely a pause from my perspective from away from the competitive ingredients of the upcoming game or game that just happened to recognize and honor the kids and all the work they've put in. So being a college athlete at a high level is not easy.
yeah.
And by high level, I mean you're you're playing in college, and you're in for some of these teams a competitive deal. This isn't the pro lifestyle where all they have to do is focus on sports. I mean, these kids are trying to get degrees, think about where they're headed after college professionally, all the relationship aspects. They're still maturing. They're certainly don't have it all figured out. So I just have a tremendous amount of respect for kids that, in particular, kids that stick it out and stay committed to one university for the duration of their time. I also applaud that when it's a good decision for them. But I like seeing those stories too. The kids that have been at the same school for 4 or 5 years with loyalty and commitment through hard times, through good times. Those are fun things to see also.
Yeah, no doubt. And just to finalize, it's also cool to see some of these coaches with some hard outer shells, tearing up and crying as they talk about their guys. So
Yeah. Well, anybody that ever played for me knows I'm straight waterworks. So I love my guys like crazy, and I wasn't
yeah.
afraid to show it. So
Nope, and that's the cool part about all of it, and a good tribute to senior night. I think as we look over the next 2 weeks, we'll see several of these coming up, and also it's also a couple weeks where we're gonna see a lot of players careers coming to an end as well. That's just a time of year where whether you make your conference tournament or you don't, or you get knocked out, in your conference tournament and don't make the national tournament. A lot of careers are coming to an end, and we always take time each year. I think it's a good time to just throw that out, talking about senior night, and if no matter what, if you played 1 year or 5 years or more at the NEI level, we do appreciate everybody's for coming out and one, giving NEI a chance. I think that's the big thing is I know we've been fighting hard to try to change the narrative of NEI basketball. And I think it's getting there. But for some people, it's very hard to commit to NEI. So for all those people that have and who've played NEI basketball and who are getting ready for their careers to come to an end here, thank you for playing NEI, but also wishing everybody the best of luck in whatever career path they have moving forward, whether it be a pro player at the next level or going professionally into whatever field you're going to major in, or a lot of times nowadays whatever you don't major in, you're still getting a job outside of the university, and we wish everybody the best of luck with that.
Yep, absolutely.
But Coach, we got to get to those games first. So, as we look ahead here into this week, I know you mentioned a couple of them already. I'll throw some out. I know you're probably you already mentioned Xavier LSUA on Tuesday night. I know Wednesday is another big night here. We got Grace and Huntington, big week for Grace. I do think that this is a week for Grace, who Huntington on Wednesday, and then at Bethel on Saturday, and they're playing for a 1 seed overall. I mean, not just for winning a Crossroads League tournament, but they're certainly a team that very, very tough week here. But if they can finish this week, they maybe put themselves in a position for one of those 4 1 seeds in the overall 1 seeds in the NEI national tournament. So big week for them. Big week for them. I know. So we got both their games circled with Huntington and Bethel. And then even going across, there's a team out of the Heart of America who is playing, starting to come really well, and we probably could have mentioned them, because they've had some great tradition as well. But Mid-American Nazarene right now, who's a couple weeks ago, they were not anywhere near or I should say a few weeks ago, they were not anywhere near making. They're still trying to fight for the Heart tournament. They're still probably on the outside for sure, looking in from the national tournament, but playing some great basketball right now. They travel to Baker, and as you're looking at a game that could be a Baker team who's a top 25 and fighting for seeding as well. You got a Mid-America team coming in. It's red hot, and led by a freshman, Joe Buchanan, who just come off the 35-point outing this past weekend, who can really, really go. So interested to see the MNU team. They're a younger team that has kind of found their stride. They got a lot of freshmen and sophomores on that squad. So cool to see them get going here a little bit late. And on that game on Wednesday, I'm really looking forward to. And then, there's some games, here out of the KCAC. We got an Oklahoma Wesleyan team who just took over first place. You mentioned it a little bit earlier in the KCAC with the Friends losing this past weekend. They got to play an Ottawa team who's actually been red hot as well. And I know Ottawa has faced some adversity this year too. Matt Cross, who came in as a head coach over from Texas College, ended up leaving mid-year, just like 3-4 games ago, and but Ottawa's been able to stick it together here, and they're a dangerous team here, not just for these teams trying, an Oklahoma Wesleyan team trying to win a KCAC title, but I think they're a team that, as we get talking about the KCAC tournament here, when we start actually seeing actually have an actual field there, they could be a surprise team to win the KCAC tournament as well. So looking forward to that game as well.
Yep. Yeah, and you never know. If you're playing great basketball in February, for most of these leagues, you just gotta win 3 games in a row, at the right time to get in. And some leagues 4, I guess, but typically 2 to 3 games for most of these conference tournaments, and you're in. And everybody's 0-0 at that point. So if you're playing really good basketball, you can certainly. You do not want to be stumbling into the postseason, even if you're the number 1 seed. So you want to be sprinting into it, feeling really confident with the way you're playing and how you're approaching things, and it can get away from you quickly if you're not in that position.
Yeah, no doubt. So, any other games you're looking forward to this week?
No, I mean, I highlighted the one. I think the one that's most intriguing, assuming you get there with the standings level. I think that Bethel Grace one is going to be good. I think I think LSUA has both Xavier and Our Lady of the Lake this week. Is that right? I double checked. So I think for them, it's really putting a nail in the coffin, on the league title, and feeling really good about heading into the rest of the season, the final week, and being in a really good place. So, but not easy matchups, right? You drop both of those, and now you're back in scramble mode, right?
Yeah, you can let everybody right back into it pretty quick.
You
So
better figure it out. You gotta keep going. This time of year is just, you have to continue to win. There's not a lot of margin anymore for a host of different reasons. And so if you're already in, you're thinking seeding and momentum. And if you're not in, you're thinking, how can we get in, right? And all those things require winning. So
yeah, I'll jump into one. Excuse me, I'll jump into one more game just to talk about it real quick. In a league that you're pretty familiar with, in the Sun here, and Saturday, Ave and Kaiser, Ave at Kaiser. I believe it's the last game between. I could be wrong. Maybe Florida Memorial plays Kaiser as well, but I believe it's one of the last games in the Sun amongst those top three teams that are all tied right now. So um, the Sun has they won't have an auto bid from their regular season champ, but it is a hosting bid. So I think that that Ave Kaiser game with Ave Kaiser and Florida Memorial all kind of right there with each other. That's a big one on Saturday there for. Just again, when you get to a game or get to this time of year when there's only one or two games left, one loss, especially in that league, all of a sudden you go from a 1 to a 3, so just kind of looking forward to that game as well. It could be a top 25 matchup. We'll see. Kaiser was just on the outside looking in the last poll. They've won 5 in a row, so they should be in the mix for top 25, but certainly looking forward to that one with a lot of on the line there in the Sun.
Well, we're a little bit of a weird schedule dynamic too, right? Where I think Ave's only got 3 conference games left, but Kaiser's got 5.
Yeah.
2 of those are Ave and Florida Memorial, and right now Ave's got, I think, a 2-game lead in the win column at least.
Yes.
Over Kaiser. So not that they can't get there, but I think if Ave were to win that, they really put themselves in a really good spot to seal that up. I mean, they were on fire Saturday, I think, against Warner. They put up a $126, and we're rolling. So Coach Copeland down there, the Energizer Bunny's got it rolling. So it's fun to see.
Nope, it's a fun league as well. So I didn't want to throw that one out there just because it's like you said, Ave with a win could lock up the Sun. So should be a fun little race there, but fun all the way across the board, Coach. I know we'll do some deeper dives next week because we'll have next week basically is going to lead us into like the final 10 days of the season, regular season, and so we should have not just like we said, some teams that have clinched some auto bids and one season in the tournament, but we should have a pretty good look into kind of what conference tournaments are going to look like as well. So we'll do a little bit more of a deeper dive next week, but a lot up for grabs this week, Coach. And I know that you and I will be watching several games, and it's always going to be fun, or always fun to see how these shake out. But a lot at stake, not just for league games, but also, as we keep mentioning, teams that are still fighting to extend their life, and sometimes those are just as deadly as the teams that are top of the league. So,
yep. Good week ahead, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody next week again.
Yep. Until then, this is Coach Lubbers Jr. signing off.